Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we're looking at some brand new cards which have been introduced within the main series of Yu-Gi-Oh, and these are actually some very old cards introduced way back in the third season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. This was the Waking the Dragons arc, and these kuriboh monsters were used by the Pharaoh against Raphael. Kuriboh is a level 1 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 300 attack and 200 defense. This card is always treated as a kuriboh card. You can only use this card's name's first effect once per turn. 1. When this card or a kuriboh monster you control is destroyed by battle, you can special summon one monster with 300 attack and 200 defense from your deck except kuriboh. 2. You contribute this card you control plus 4 monsters from your hand and or field, one each of kuribi, kuriboh, kuribay, and kuriboh. Special summon one Babylon from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So with the first effect, it's able to replace itself with another one of the Kuriboh brothers. That's essentially its effect. Or if you happen to lose one of the other kuriboh monsters, that actually works alongside this effect as well. It triggers the same way as though you're attacking into this as a target. So constantly being able to recycle through your deck to thin it a bit. The secondary effect means that by tributing this alongside all the other cards, Bay, Bee, Boo, and Bo, you're able to bring out your Babylon, which is the boss fusion version of those monsters when they fuse together, which is useful because that can be either from the hand, the deck, or the graveyard, which means you don't have to spend time and resources having to search for the card. You also don't have to recover it from the graveyard. It can come straight back. Kuriboh is a level 1 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 300 attack and 200 defense. This card is always treated as a kuriboh card. You can only use this card's name's first effect once per turn. 1. When this card or your kuriboh monster is destroyed by battle, you can add one spell or trap card that specifically lists the card kuriboh in its text from your deck to your hand. 2. Once per turn, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, if you control another kuriboh monster, you can change the attack of all other face-up monsters you currently control to 0 until the end of this turn, and if you do, negate the attack. I love the design of this card. Firstly, again, the first effect is quite different to the previous version in that you're able to just search for any spell or trap card that happens to have kuriboh in the text. So that will include things like multiply, detonate. There are probably a list of other examples. Flute of Summoning kuriboh, that's another one. And I'm sure there are more than that. And having the ability to search for any of these spell or trap cards gives you more flexibility rather than having to run random searching cards. The secondary ability is also quite decent because you're able to zero out your kuriboh monsters. Okay, they don't have many attack points anyway, so either way, regardless of what you're zeroing out, losing 300 attack on a monster isn't bad, in exchange to being able to negate one of those attacks. And to top it all off, the attack reduction only happens until the end of the turn. It's not a permanent effect. Kuriboh is a level 1 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster. It's got 300 attack and 200 defense. This card is also always treated as a kuriboh card. 1. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can discard this card, add one kuriboh monster from your deck to your hand, except kuriboh. And 2. Once per turn, as a quick effect, you can discard one trap, then target one face-up monster your opponent controls. It loses 1500 attack until the end of this turn. I am a little confused why the first part of its effect is when your opponent's monster declares an attack, you're then able to search for one of your kuriboh monsters. Perhaps it's useful in some other ways. For example, if you're on low life points and you're about to lose during that turn, maybe it's okay because you can then discard your normal kuriboh to negate the battle damage you'll take during that turn. Or maybe some of the other ones happen to manipulate attack or defense stats, or to be able to negate the attack anyway. And therefore, by using that effect, you're able to do this when you need to, and not actually when you don't, which is typically during your main phase. The second part of the effect, I think, is quite conditional. It does let you reduce one of your opponent's monsters' attack by 1500, which is a decent amount of reduction. For some monsters, that's more than half their attack points. and it can mean the difference between them winning and them losing some of the bigger, higher investment cards, but it does require you to discard a trap card. I would have preferred if it had been to discard maybe another one of the kuriboh monsters. That way it would work more, it would help to synergize the deck a little bit further. Rather, if you're running a very limited trap lineup within your deck, you might not have the ability to use this effect. Kuriboh is a level 1 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 300 attack and 200 defense. This card is also always treated as a kuriboh card. As a quick effect, you can discard this card, then target one kuriboh monster you control. It gains 1500 attack. 2, you contribute this card you control, plus 4 monsters from your hand and or field, 1 each of Kuriba, Kuribi, Kuriboh, and Kuribu. Add 1 Kuribandit from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon 1 fiend monster from your hand. I love the design of this card, and of the various kuriboh monsters, this is definitely my favourite. Unlike the other one that discards and has to be discarded by getting rid of a trap card to lower one of your opponent's monster's attack, this increases your monster's attack simply by discarding this card. It grants another one of your kuribohs an additional 1500 attack. That is a massive amount of damage you could potentially be doing. Yes, it's not great considering kuriboh tend to be like 300 attack. That makes it 1800 attack. For a level 1, that's very impressive. For a level 4 you might be facing, it might not be enough to actually defeat that monster. So you'll need to have like a combination of cards to be able to manipulate this effect. The secondary part of the effect requires you to get rid of all of your kuriboh monsters to then have your Kuribandit. And that's actually quite decent as well, because Kuribandit has the ability to excavate your spell and trap cards from the top of your deck and then be able to search for that card, and it also is able to be summoned within that turn immediately. You don't have to wait for another turn. There are some cards that do this which allow for an additional normal summon, so this isn't actually a strange effect. Actually, it's becoming a lot more common, but it's definitely something nice as an added incentive. Kuri Babylon is a level 5 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 1500 attack and 1000 defense. You can only use either this card's name's first or third effect per turn, and only once that turn. 1, if you have more monsters in your graveyard than your opponent does, you can special summon this card from your hand. 2, it gains 300 attack and defense for each kuriboh monster you control and in your graveyard. And 3, during your main or battle phase, as a quick effect, you can return this card to the hand, and if you do, special summon 1 Kuriba, 1 Kuribi, 1 Kuriboh, 1 Kuribu, 1 Kuribe from your hand and or graveyard in attack position. I love this card, definitely. Obviously, it's the fusion of the 5, which is fantastic. I'll notice, and you've probably noticed this as well, that this is an exact total combination of their attack and their defense. Kuriboh have 300 attack and 200 defense. 300 times 5, 1500. 200 times 5 is 1000, so that matches exactly the attack and the defense. Its summoning condition is really easy because you'll have multiple of the kuriboh already in your graveyard. Even just to summon this card, you're probably going to have stacks of monsters in the grave. So meeting this summoning condition to special summon, not a problem. The secondary ability can be devastating. It gains 300 attack and defense for each kuriboh monster you control and in the graveyard. Think of it this way. It's not separate to individual kuriboh monsters. It doesn't have you on the requirement that there have to be different names of kuriboh monsters. It just happens to be kuriboh monsters. So if you've got 3 of one type of copy of a kuriboh in your graveyard, so for example Kuribe, that's an additional 900 attack. It's not having to be a different name. It just has to be either on the in the hand or on the field. So you have the flexibility either way. You can always constantly pump up this card's attack. If you really wanted to, at its maximum attack points, this could become a 6000 attack monster if you've got all 15 copies in the graveyard or between the graveyard and your field. But it's unlikely to happen. You're definitely going to get at least this card's attack points doubled, which for a level 5 monster is very intimidating. And the nice thing about it is, if you happen to not want this card, or for whatever reason you just don't need it and actually you need the other effects out, you can always just swap this card during either the main or the battle phase, so this can actually work against your opponent if they try and destroy this with anything, to just swap it out for the versions that you used to create it. and those cards can come from either the hand and or the graveyard. They do have to be in attack position, that's the only concern I have, but many of them have trigger effects that actually help, so you'll be protected either way. And the final card is 5-Star Twilight. This is a normal spell card. With the effect, you can only activate one card with this card's name per turn. 1 if the only monster you control is one level 5 monster. Tribute it, special summon 1 kuriboh, 1 kuriboh, 1 kuriboh, 1 kuriboh, and 1 kuriboh from your hand, deck, and or graveyard, but they cannot be tributed for a tribute summon. This is fine as an effect. It's useful because it just doesn't have to be used on your Babylon. It can actually be used on any level 5 monster. If you happen to be running anything, you can just tribute that and just bring these monsters out. And it's not a case of those cards have their effects negated or they have any other restrictions outside of the inability to use them as a tribute summon. I think that's a bit unfair. I don't think they're so powerful that they need to be limited from being used for tribute summons, but I suppose that they needed some downside to this card, and that's the condition alongside the level 5 requirement that they've opted to go for. I love the design of these cards, and I would have loved to have seen these come out maybe at the same time Curry Bandit came out. I checked the initial release date for Curry Bandit that came out of Dragons of Legends as a secret rare on the 25th of April 2014. So when you compare this is about 7 years later, which is very bizarre. It might have had some relevance back then because at that point we had, I think, we had pendulums out, but we didn't have anything further to that, so it might have made more of a mark then, as opposed to when we had Link Monsters out, which has just kind of added fuel to the fire of the extra deck. Definitely, I think they've made a bit of a mistake releasing it this late, but better late than never. So what do you guys think of the kuriboh monsters? Is this something you're interested in? Are you a classic player who's seen these cards within the anime and are looking to pick those up? Or do you think this is just meh and maybe should have been released 10-15 years ago? Whatever you think, leave those comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.